Lutheran all my life, so I don't really know at a heart level, sort of at an intrinsic level, what it is to be any other denomination or faith tradition. However, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Midwest, and when I was a kid, almost all of my friends were Catholic. And I was extremely envious of them. Because they had all these cool things, right? So they had the rosary, they had the Pope and the Vatican, and as a girl, they got to wear these really nice, frilly white dresses for communion, and I didn't get to do that. And they had the whole eating fish on Friday thing. Anyway, all of those little rituals were utterly fascinating to me, and mostly because we just didn't do them in the Lutheran church. Well, I had two girlfriends who were Catholic, and they were twins. And so when I say they were Catholic, we would probably say today that they were very Catholic. And whenever I would spend the night at their house, they would kneel at the foot of their bed with their father sort of watching over them and say their evening prayers. And so when I spent the night there, I also kneeled at the foot of their bed and said evening prayers, which I remember very well because we did not really pray in my house, especially in that manner. Well, the first time I spent the night there, they sort of went through their routine, and they gave me a bit of an apologetic, sort of excuse, like, well, we have to say our prayers, and we have to go to church every Sunday, and we have to go to confession. So, church and prayer I knew about because I was Lutheran. We did do those things. But truth be told, confession was the other thing about the Catholic Church that totally fascinated me. Because we didn't do that in my church, which, really isn't true. Like, as a grown-up, I know this isn't true. We do have confession in the Lutheran Church. But as an 11-year-old, I wondered what it was like to sit in those booths. I wondered how it felt. I wondered if it helped at all. And I also mostly wondered what you said in there. The whole what you said was very confusing to me. I was pretty sure that confession consisted of telling the priest all the wrong, bad, sinful things that you had done. And at age 11, while I wasn't perfect, I really wasn't sure what all of those things could possibly be. I wasn't that bad of a person. What I didn't realize then was that sin isn't just bad things. I mean, because if we could define sin as just bad stuff, well then it'd be really easy. We'd just stop doing all the bad stuff and we'd be good to go, right? Well, in today's reading from Mark, he highlights that sin isn't just those outward things, those things that we can point to. Like, we can say, well, you did this to me, or you did that. Jesus is saying, that's not really how I'm defining sin. I mean, he talks about this cultural phenomenon of dealing with cleanliness and hygiene. But what he's really trying to bring front and center is the issue of sin, which isn't something that we like to talk about at all. But Jesus talks about it because he knows that the things that ravage our hearts aren't our outward actions. The things that sort of eat away at us inside are the things that separate us from others, the things that separate us from God. And often those things that separate us are things that we don't always define as sin. Things like shame and guilt. Things like loneliness and abandonment. Things like failure and pointlessness. And we don't think of those things as sin because they're not bad, right? We all have those feelings. But all those feelings are what lie under the outward expressions. Jesus lists off this litany that certainly at age 11 I hadn't committed. And he lists off this litany of things, fornication and theft and murder and adultery and avarice, and he goes on and on and on. And the only one that I can think of that I might have been guilty of at age 11 was envy, because I already confessed to you that I was really envious of my Catholic friends. But, just because I couldn't say I did this or this or this, it doesn't mean that I wasn't separated from God because of shame or guilt or feeling like I wasn't good enough or whatever that might be. So those of you who have had experiences with confessional booths may feel the exact opposite of intrigue or fascination. Dread or anxiety may be more apropos for you. But there is this interesting phenomenon that's happened in religion today regarding confession. Confession is either viewed as a burden, like it's something that you have to do, right? It's something that's mandated by the church. Or it's something that's not really necessary because, if God already knows what we did, then what's the point of confessing it? What's the point of saying it out loud? Or there's also the truth that confession can be downright dangerous. Because once you put it out into the universe, you can't take it back. And it changes everything. So it's one of those things that sit alongside of sin that Jesus calls us to do to clean our hearts, but it's also a really, really hard process to go through. Now what we usually do here as a church is we have corporate confession. And we admit collectively that we have all sinned. And if we really take the time to think about that practice, there is something that is powerfully uniting about standing before each other and God and admitting that we have failed one another and disappointed God. There's not one of us that can say that we haven't failed at some point or disappointed someone at some time. In our bulletin, it says, at one point in there, it says, a brief silence for reflection and meditation. And it's this quiet time that we do during our confession part, and it is designed to mark a holy space, and it's a time in which you're invited to confess all the stuff that weighs on your heart and your mind. And so usually, I swear it's only like 30 seconds that we pause. But that silence can sort of seem like this chasm of eternity just set down in the middle of our worship space. And I sometimes wonder if it's not supposed to feel that way. As if in that moment, we are offered a gift of suspended time. And maybe you've not ever thought of it like that before, that you're given this gift of suspended time. Because I think often it just feels uncomfortable. Or maybe could we just get on with it already? Or even, did the pastor forget her next line? But there are times when we have that silence, for me and probably for you, that when I stand in that silence, I begin to get lost in it. And sometimes what happens is when I start to pour out my heart, I begin to realize that I could go on and on for hours and hours of stuff, which I know just sounds horrible. But the truth is, regardless of what your vocation is, I am as guilty as the next person as, putting walls up so Jesus doesn't come into my heart to try and cleanse it from whatever it is needs cleansing. So I'm often thankful to get to stand in that space, and that the Holy Spirit, which resides in me and in you, breaks the silence. And the silence that is broken is not that hush that you hear that falls over the congregation, but the silence that the Holy Spirit breaks is the deafening silence that we put up between ourselves and God, that we put up between ourselves and others. And all the stuff that we don't want to say, the Holy Spirit speaks for us. And when we are full out honest with ourselves and God and others, we sort of hook into what Jesus is calling us to do. Much of what I have experienced through confession, whether it's our whole group, sort of like we do here, or silently in prayer, or even to my own pastor, or sometimes to somebody that I have wronged, is I feel like my skin fits again, like my heart is clean. But the problem with that clean heart thing, and if you ask anybody who's ever had to say or do something that's really hard, that they know God needs them to do, is that act of confession takes a lot of pride swallowing and a lot of truth telling. And they will tell you that sometimes having their heart washed by Jesus feels more like having a Brillo pad scraped over an open wound. But we confess that we are in bondage to sin and we can't free ourselves, and those are the words that we say. And we confess that we've sinned against God and one another. And the gift of this, I mean, when I think about that bondage piece, it doesn't feel like a gift at all. But the gift of it is that although we all may be unique in our individual ways that we have sinned, there's not one of us that is utterly clean. There's not one of us that is without sin. And unless your name is Jesus Christ, we all have stuff that we've done to separate ourselves. And I was thinking about this whole, this bondage to sin thing, and I was trying to think, because, right, we use this language all the time, the sin language and the bondage language, and I was trying to think, like, what does it feel like? And the best I could come up with was, when you go to the dentist and they lay that heavy blanket over you, that it feels like that, but it's not just like that. It's like a straitjacket. It's a heavy blanket straitjacket thing. And that's how it feels. And I think that's why Jesus needs us to confess it, so it gets off of us. So as I was thinking about that, I was also thinking, if I'm going to talk to you all about sin and confession, I was trying to think what the hardest thing is that I've ever had to confess. And I do, first let me say, I do think that we have to confess, not because it's mandated by the church or, we just sit, in somebody's office or any of that kind of stuff. But I think we need to, because the Holy Spirit that resides in all of us isn't going to rest unless we do it. So anyway, back to the hardest thing I've ever had to confess, which is going to be a total letdown for all of you, and it's not that I haven't, done loathsome things and screamed at my kids and, gossiped and been impatient with my parents, I could go on. But what is so excruciating about confessing sins is that when I take the time to say them to God or to another person, they become real. And I am aware in a very fragile and naked way that I am a sinner. And I can't just point my fingers at the Pharisees or the scribes. And I can't only point my finger at people that have hurt me, or that even, sometimes I can't just point at people that I love. It's me too. And so week after week, we come into this place, and we hear these words wash over us. I therefore declare to you that the entire forgiveness of all your sins, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That you are forgiven by God himself. That is monumental. There aren't words for me to describe how staggering a statement that is. That promise is one of the most freeing, forgiving, and transformative graces that God bestows upon us. And through those words, Jesus enters in and makes something that might have been defiled clean. In Deuteronomy, the lessons that we read today, we read Deuteronomy, we read Mark, and it sounds like all this law and commandment, which it is, but we have this idea that we, in some ways, these commandments are going to be able to legislate the gospel into our hearts. And that isn't what happens. What's happening in Deuteronomy is God is calling Israel out of exile into a land of promise, to live together in relationship with one another and with God. And so it's a bit intriguing because the very definition of being exiled is being separated or barred from that which is native to you. And in some ways that's what sin does, is we exile ourselves from God, from others, and from ourselves. We exile ourselves from that which is native to our souls. But the promise is, even when we separate ourselves from the promised land, God will bring us back. God will seek us out, find us in our sin and separation and desperation, and often save us from our very selves. My most favorite theological book from seminary is called Sinning Like a Christian. And it contains one of my all-time favorite quotes. It's only a sentence long, so and it actually sums up my entire sermon. So you could have had, my 10 minutes of talking, or one sentence, but I thought you needed your money's worth this morning. But the statement is, even in my attempts at rehabilitation, I sin. Fortunately, the scriptures are unanimous. Jesus came to seek and save only sinners. And that changes everything. No matter what you have done, no matter what you think you have done, and no matter what you may do in the future, the promise of Jesus Christ is you have been forgiven. In the name of the Father, and of the